I think this is going to be one of the most real videos I'm going to make in this series. One that not only speaks about myself, but potentially, if we're right, the fact that Kojima did, in fact, achieve his goal, even with the Ludens he cultivated with the breadcrumbs he left. If you'd rather skip past my anecdotal thoughts that tie into everything, look at the timeline and skip past the intro to Chapter 2. As usual, these are all theories, and they're based on all of Kojima's works, as well as the full Silent Hill series. Let's not waste any time. Roll the intro.
First things first, you're going to want to obtain MS-DOS games.
No. Let's get to the real meat and potatoes of the game. Chapter 1. Schrödinger's Ruse. Our galaxy consists of some 300 billion stars. Around half are orbited by planets, and it is said that on average, conditions on 2 of a planet's stars are suitable for life. No great leap of imagination is needed to believe the universe must be home to a myriad of life forms. But what sort of intelligence would develop on these worlds? This is truly beyond our imagination. What's more, we cannot say that our universe is the only universe at the quantum level, until a wave function collapses upon observation. Schrödinger's cat is alive and dead as a superposition of states. The moment observation occurs, these two possibilities branch into separate worlds, with the universe continuing to split infinitely. If the universe splits without end, it's possible it could eventually recreate scenes from the past. And if those moments played out differently, it wouldn't negate what happened in our reality. A paradox would simply mean another future. The following is one possible story in one possible universe, born of paradox after paradox after paradox. So, why do I still see a possibility that this insane sounding idea could still happen? I know it's implausible, but most of this video is going to try and explain why it is that I persist with these theories. Instead, I'm going to explain right off the bat why, right now, Kojima's deception and the Ruse news is the equivalent to Schrödinger's cat. I've spent 3 years talking about Death Stranding with the idea that it could be part of a larger concept, that Kojima has been potentially orchestrating a massive web of multimedia connections for the sake of creating the greatest interconnected narrative of all time. I still think that this is a fairly decent possibility, as insane as it sounds to most. Recently, this possibility in my mind went from 50-50 to 75-25, but again, I'll get to that in due time. Fixating on this concept with no word from Kojima himself has created what I can only describe as a serious case of phantom pain in my soul. The possibility of a much grander concept that I think only he could possibly pull off with his connections and his insanely brilliant brain has tantalized me for 3 years now. In that time, I've loved and lost, both in my personal life and in the consideration of this concept. The friends I've made, the enemies I've earned, the mind I'd lost, the comrades I've lost. For a long time, it wouldn't stop hurting. I've made bonds greater than even blood can stake. But at this point, I have to find Chapter 3 in my heart. I know, corny as fuck, throw your boots metaphorically. But really, I need to allow myself the inner peace I deserve. You all do too. I think if all of this is a meta-narrative, or even if it was only MGSV, that this was the ultimate goal. For the audience, you and me, to create our own peace day. There was never a Chapter 3. MGSV is a complete experience, and Peace Day was a metaphor. We all have to find our own peace within ourselves. If that was his goal, then I'll say bravo. Mission accomplished, Kojima-san, you brilliant bastard. If not, then thank you for inadvertently helping me in my journey towards repairing my mental health. Chapter 2.
Loyalty to the end.
That said, unless you've been living under a rock or have been too busy to hear about it, you've likely heard the rumors boiling for the past year that Kojima is in fact still working on Silent Hills through some form of arbitrary agreement, using Sony as a bridge between the two. If this sounds at all familiar, that's because this has been one of our theories for quite some time. To clarify, in case the use of "our" is concerning to some, I'm referring to the collective consensus of my group, the Sons of Bridges. Anyway, I'll concede that the idea was planted in our heads due to Python and Selkin's videos, which I noted in part 1 of my series. Back then, the idea was that Kojima's new KJP was still partnered with Konami. I will say at the very least that there is some form of agreement in place, since there are both Kojima Productions owned by Konami and Kojima Productions owned by Kojima himself, and they are two separate entities. Konami's KJP has essentially become equivalent to LucasArts being nothing more than a branding piece. In Konami's case, it's to legally continue selling Metal Gear games with that branding. From this point forward, the remainder of this video will be discussing all of this with the idea that the ruse is, in fact, true and that we are getting Silent Hills and a Metal Gear Solid remake by Bluepoint. With all that said, I didn't blatantly say that I thought Sony could be the bridge for this potential arbitrary agreement behind the scenes until about part 3 of the series. This is all the way back in November of 2018 when I started writing it. December is when it was done being written. In that video, I showed the "You Are Not Red E" commercial from the original pre-launch PS1 ads. This was mentioned by Jeff Keighley in a tweet cryptically, with Konami playing the role of the Red Ogre while Sony played the Blue Ogre. In case you need a refresher, here's the clip. You can skip past it in the timeline if you don't need a refresher. There's a Japanese folktale that's about a red and a blue ogre. When you think about it, Konami is the Red Ogre, a lonely, misunderstood beast who'd only had his brash instinct as a means of communication, in the end only wanting people to like him. However, due to the Red Ogre's nature, people feared him and despised him. Kojima, on the other hand, is the Blue Ogre, the friend of Red Ogre, or Konami. The Ogre of thoughtfulness and serenity, cunning and resolution. The two ogres' opposites allowed them to become great friends, and Kojima was made vice president of their digital arm. Then one day, the Blue Ogre, Kojima, asked for his friend, the Red Ogre, to run him out of town. It was all the Blue Ogre's plan, and in the end, whilst the two stayed friends, the Blue Ogre left in isolation. In other words, Kojima formed his new studio leaving Konami, the Red Ogre alone again. The Red Ogre, curious of the Blue Ogre's absence, scoured the world day and night for his friend.
Now do you remember who you are? What you were meant to do?
We hope to earn you back. Chapter 3.
Staging a drama that is palatable to the general masses.
You see, the biggest thing that still gets me to this day is that supposedly, the change in management at the top of Konami was so vastly sharp and unabashedly greedy that Kojima was considered an outcast by the relatively new higher-ups. Yes, business is business, it's about money, but there's a lot more to it than that. Japanese society is heavily built upon the concept of moral principle, and a lot of that has to do with honor. This part is going to borrow somewhat from a Ruse discussion channel aptly named the Ruse Cruise, so if you want full context and some refreshers, I highly recommend checking out their channel. Maybe you'll learn something that you didn't know about before. I sure as hell did, some of which I'm going to present to you now. Look at these ads from Konami looking for talent to hire on. Something should be gravely apparent immediately to you. That's right. The unethical actions that Konami has allegedly been performing right and left almost seems like a real-life nightmare when you compare the way things appeared to be prior to this. Also, if you look at what Kojima himself has said about Konami publicly, he hasn't said a single bad thing about them. What Kojima said about Metal Gear Survive technically wasn't saying something bad, It was expressing a false distaste for an idea which he had already planned to do that isn't bizarre for Metal Gear at all, as discussed several other times. If all of these alleged actions from Konami's newer management, with how far removed he is from his tenure directly in Konami's hire, don't you think he would have said something? Supposedly, he was demoted all the way from vice president down to the senior content officer. And sure, they probably did this on a corporate level to make this narrative more palatable for the masses, to make the counter-narrative that Kojima wasn't fired seem completely asinine. This is the report that started it all as far as I know. The original article is on a Japanese website that requires a premium membership, so I'll be relying on Kotaku's report for this segment. Kojima Productions, the studio behind the upcoming Metal Gear Solid V, and long famous as a brand of its own, is now simply known as the No. 8 Production Department. The computers in this section, Nikkei says, and as we reported earlier this year, are allegedly not connected to the internet and are only able to send internal messages. Nikkei reports that employees leaving the company offices during their lunch break are having their absences monitored with time cards. Those who stay out too long are having their names announced throughout the company. That there are cameras in the office corridors that aren't there for security, but rather to monitor the movements of Konami's own employees. That most Konami employees do not have their own permanent company email addresses. Staff who must deal with people outside the company, such as sales and PR, do. However, everyone else routinely has their addresses randomized and changed every few months. Note, Konami employee emails are typically a few letters followed by a string of numbers, but this random email changing has been going on for a few years at Konami. A while back, one Konami employee told me that this was done to prevent headhunting. Over the years, I have seen developers with company email addresses, but this might have recently changed. That Konami game developers who aren't seen as useful are reassigned to jobs as security guards, cleaning staff at the company's fitness clubs, or roles at a patchy slot machine factory. This includes not just junior staff, but producers who have worked on well-known game titles. In 2013, Asahi News, one of Japan's largest newspapers, ran an interview with a former Konami staffer who allegedly went from game development to working in Konami's patchy slot factory, causing him to experience severe depression. That one former employee, upon announcing on Facebook that they were leaving Konami and had gotten a new job elsewhere, had their post monitored. Nikkei says remaining Konami staff who liked the post were all shuffled within the company. Kotaku is following up with Konami for comment. So these are the allegations against Konami up till this point. This, however, doesn't line up with other articles surrounding Kojima and the split between him and Konami. Fuck, what's worse is Kotaku's actually the ones who are contradicting it. It's the modern day doublethink. For the past few years, it has felt like Kojima and Konami have been at loggerheads. Even last month, the saga seemed to be endless. In a new interview, however, Kojima discusses what was good about his Konami days, namely, letting him make the games he wanted to. What I'm grateful to Konami for is that when I proposed something I wanted to make, they let me make it, Kojima tells website Toyokazai. Conversely, I wasn't bound by them saying you need to do it like this. In Japanese, Kojima says kansha shite iru, which refers to being appreciative, being grateful, or being thankful. Kojima joined Konami at the dawn of the gaming industry, and he recalls how there were only 5 people on his dev team when he started. It was hard work. I remember how I used to only sleep 3 hours every day, Kojima says. No doubt he was able to have more opportunities as a new recruit than a fresh hire today, working on a massive title. Kojima, however, appears to see how fortunate he's been to have that opportunity. According to Kojima, when he would ask to be allowed to make a game, submitting a proposal, describing the aim, giving the development period, and saying the approximate number of staff needed, he'd get the green light. It was like that from when I joined to the end, says Kojima. Because of that, I am the person I am today. To me, that makes perfect sense for a few reasons. Most importantly, the level of bullshit that Konami is pulling according to the Konami Nadi is inhumane beyond the point that I would think the Japanese law would allow, even under contract. Do you really think a company like that would be allowed to debase a person in such a way as to take their job title and demote them from a game developer to a janitor at a fucking gym? There'd be 1,000 lawsuits if that shit happened here, so what makes it that much different over there? I decided to do a bit of research and found that there are similar laws in Japan safeguarding the employee from the employer from such mistreatment, particularly that an employee can leave at any time. Would you honestly stay at a company that demoted you from a development position all the way down to sanitation? Fuck that, you'd be scouting new companies, you don't put up with that shit. Furthermore, on this subject of the Konami Nadi possibly all being a ruse, wouldn't it make sense that it's a ruse? Kojima was unsuccessful at fooling fans for very long with the reveal of Moby Dick Studios' The Phantom Pain. Why wouldn't he, as the vice president of Konami, strike a deal within the higher-ups to stage a ruse? This is a rather logical progression and escalation considering his position, appointed to him in 2011. Why the hell would he give up the vice presidency of Konami just to form his own independent studio, the likeness of which is still being used by Konami?
So with that said, I still think it's quite possible that there was an agreement with the higher-ups that they would make a big scene about all this for the sake of creating this narrative about information control and fake news, as these things that Kojima predicted in the 90s did in fact come to fruition, unfortunately. To put that final nail in the coffin, it seems that this could be the case. Chapter 4.
I've prepared a ruse of sorts.
So for quite some time, I've been showing articles that have been promoting this idea that Kojima got horribly wronged, but I've also shown many examples of why this appears to be incredibly false. I think the biggest proof of this is that even after proving that he can be successful as an independent creator, Kojima hasn't said a single bad thing about Konami. While some would argue that this is because he is trying to be the bigger man in the situation, I'm still unconvinced that this is the case. Aside from this, they still allowed him to have a going away party. As I've noted before, this is unusual given how unceremoniously and almost maliciously Patrice Désilets, the creator of Assassin's Creed, was not just fired, but actually escorted out of the building as though he had committed some kind of crime. If Konami was nearly as bad as the Konami Nadi claimed, Kojima would not have been allowed to have had this farewell party, and would have had a similar story to Patrice Désilets to tell at the Game Awards when he was given the award by Jeff Keighley. Instead, Kojima said the following when given the award.
Last year, I thought I lost everything, but I didn't lose anything. Thanks to all of you.
I find that laugh as suspicious as when JVR laughs during this answer about his thoughts on the Kojima-Konami split, since it had just happened around that time of the interview.
I can't really comment on the split, but I can comment on us just wanting to make a movie that captures the fact that Metal Gear is Metal Gear and it is nothing else.
Then, of course, something that's still infamous with many rusers is this clip of Tommy Earl Jenkins, the actor who played and is the likeness for Die Hardman, said the following.
The game have a final relationship with images, only say yes or no. I have no comment on that particular question regarding whether the connection is with previous stuff or not.
If he has no comment, why is it that he's been retweeting and interacting with all this MGS related stuff? He doesn't have any connection to it as far as I know, and I never heard him talk about being a fan prior to all this. I think it makes that lack of comment when directly asked even more suspicious that he's continually interacting with all these things that are raising suspicion that there is indeed a Metal Gear connection. It's interesting that Metal Gear has been in the news as of late, as I want to discuss something that I think most people missed in an interview that not many people saw with Jordan Vogt-Roberts, where he spoiled a pretty big element of the MGS movie outright.
I really think movies like Snowpiercer or Edge of Tomorrow, which are not based on video games, but have a lot of like core video game mechanics in a strange way baked into it. You know, Snowpiercer really is like a side-scroller beat-em-up. You know, the whole thing is a left-to-right experience. And Edge of Tomorrow sort of like captures the respawning save point, you know, like mechanics of what a video game is. And so you not only have like just the pure plotting, but then you have the emotions of what that gameplay makes you feel. You know, what it felt to be sneaking around and to know that like being caught had real consequence. What it felt to be fucking with guards as you like knock on a thing and run around the way. Huh? What was that noise? You know, and just like the Japanese goofiness of like finding people like depantsed or what I refer to as like almost a Tarkovsky military surrealism, you know, the like magic real elements that are in that game and the almost like survival horror elements that are in that game. Like there's a lot of really complex tones and things in Metal Gear, and it's very easy for people or a studio to just sort of view it as like a futuristic military franchise, and that's not what it is, you know. And so it's like you have to first and foremost understand all of those things and intelligently know how to focus in on like and sort of mix and match and remix in terms of like what story you're telling and tap into parts of the story, like the original Metal Gear of Boss and Snake actually facing off, which is not something that's been like rendered to the fidelity of the rest of the games in the franchise. And then for me, like there's a device that we have in the script that I love that really plays into like some of the core thematics, you know, like a big part of those games for Kojima fundamentally is asking like, how do we make the whole world whole again? How do we make ourselves whole again? And the cycle of pain that we as people are caught in, that the world is caught in, and that these soldiers in particular are caught in. And so for me, there's a device that we're playing with that I think it's not what the Edge of Tomorrow thing does, but in the same way that sort of is like thinking outside the box, we're applying, I think, a very unexpected and very like Kojima-san esque fucking with your audience, but in a way that allows you to properly tell this story in a way that those games felt disruptive because they fucked with the format of and they challenged your expectations of games. And so it's equally important to me to not just take these elements of the movie, but to be equally disruptive, you know, in the film environment. And
see, there were a good handful of people thinking he was just saying device in the sense of a plot device. And they're not wrong, that is one of the meanings of it. But this use of the word device is dual intended. If you'll notice, he was talking about how it's similar to Edge of Tomorrow with this device. I still haven't seen the movie, but I am aware that it has a plot device that essentially acts as a respawn mechanic. Well, what device in MGS lore allows this? I'll give you a hint. It's the crux of all of my theories. That's right, the Copplethorne engine. As I said, I haven't seen Edge of Tomorrow yet. I actually own it, but it's about 1,000 miles away in storage at the moment, so it's probably going to be a while until I can actually watch it when I get my stuff back. But a more apt comparison would be one that Python and Selkin have made themselves, which is that of Source Code, the Jake Gyllenhaal movie where he plays a military soldier who is forced to relive the last 8 minutes of a man's life over and over until he discovers who was the fault of a terrorist attack. I'm going to discuss the big spoiler at the end, so if you don't want that spoiled, please go to the timestamp on screen to avoid it being spoiled. So basically, the scientists created this machine that allowed the user to tap into the afterglow of a human brain, which retained the last 8 minutes of memories of that person. One thing that intrigued me and why I'm saying it's more apt is that it's almost a cross between a simulation and a bridge between dimensions. By this, I mean there's a point where the simulation kind of begins to break down and Coulter Stevens sees polygons. How much of this is a simulation break versus a mental break is unclear, but perhaps that's the point of that being included. This was brought on by Coulter's realization that he was declared dead after a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. However, he wasn't dead, and that's why he was a candidate for this program. He was just alive enough to be hooked up to this machine and able to be sent into these alternate universes. Also, the reason that I've deduced as to why the ending is Coulter saving everyone on the train and his consciousness transferring from his universe to the one he was in for the simulation is that the whole reason he was a candidate was his unstable condition. It opened a wave function much in the same way that infants and young children open a wave function for the Copplethorne engine. In all moments, he's still alive. He's both alive and dead, especially since his pod is rarely checked up on, and we only see him near the very end of the movie. So when he was finally released at the moment of the end of those 8 minutes from the Afterglow, it created a universe where the wave function collapsed with Coulter still in the mind of Sean Fentress. This, of course, can be compounded every time he solves a terrorist attack, or whatever situation the source code could be used for. So every time he accomplishes his mission, he prevents something horrible and is transferred to another consciousness in another universe, until eventually Coulter's ability to remain alive in that box runs out, and he eventually dies, having solved hundreds of cases. This can be applied to the upcoming MGS movie as well. Otherwise, the reasoning would be pretty loose, and JVR has stated on many occasions that he wants to do the property its proper cinematic iteration. I can't imagine he would skimp on the reasoning for Snake being able to respawn and having knowledge of the areas ahead, given there's a pre-existing device that would make it all make sense without any additional work. Chapter 5.
If that's not symbolic, I don't know what is.
To bridge this connection, I'm going to bring back up wave functions, but I want to talk about Death Stranding and its use of wave function manipulation. What is a BB? A BB is a tool according to its creators. This tool requires a living, breathing infant. According to Deadman, they don't last beyond a year after being put into the field. So if you were to put a word on it, that's when a BB's wave function collapses. It's no longer, as Deadman says, never truly alive nor truly dead. According to Deadman, if a BB is removed from its pod, there's a high probability of a catastrophic failure and death of the BB. However, he was hiding the fact that Sam himself was a BB who was removed from his pod. Sam had to learn that on his own. Bringing it back around to Metal Gear, there's an image that's important that is shown in MGS4. This image represents the 5 AI cores of the SOP system, or the Sons of the Patriots. This AI was created to control all facets of life: the economy, war, weapons, thought, speech, behavior, etc. A computer powerful enough to manage all this, it's unlikely that it would still be powered by binary computation. And an engine doesn't necessarily mean an engine for a game or a simulation. It can also be an engine for computation. It would make more sense to invest in quantum computation to be able to calculate and control the globe's access to information. Quantum computation utilizes the concept of superposition. To explain, this is a bit. This is a qubit. Oh, qubits sound familiar? It should, given the primary way you bring people online in Death Stranding is through your Cupid. I'll get to that momentarily, but I want to explain one of the fundamental ways bits and qubits are different, as this may help you understand why this is a fundamental change and has heavy implications. A binary digit, characterized as 0 and 1, is used to represent information in classical computers. When averaged over both of its states, 0 and 1, a binary digit can represent up to 1 bit of Shannon information, where a bit is the basic unit of information. However, in this article, the word bit is synonymous with a binary digit. In classical computer technologies, a processed bit is implemented by one of the 2 levels of low DC voltage, and whilst switching from one of these 2 levels to the other, a so-called forbidden zone must be passed as fast as possible, as electrical voltage cannot change from one level to another instantaneously. There are 2 possible outcomes for the measurement of a qubit, usually taken to have the value 0 and 1 like a bit or a binary digit. However, whereas the state of a bit can only be either 0 or 1, the general state of a qubit, according to quantum mechanics, can be a coherent superposition of both. Moreover, whereas a measurement of a classical bit would not disturb its state, a measurement of a qubit would destroy its coherence and irrevocably disturb the superposition state. It is possible to fully encode 1 bit in 1 qubit. However, a qubit can hold more information, up to 2 bits using superdense coding, for example. But I think it would be better for Hartman and Amelie to explain it with the chiral network.
Congratulations, Sam. I understand you now have access to a chiral printer. An extraordinarily useful device that can only function because of the manner in which our network utilizes the beach, enabling us to transfer massive volumes of data instantaneously. Since under normal circumstances, such transfers would take hours, if not days, some have speculated that the chiral network might, in essence, be a time machine. That it is transmitting data into the past. Suffice it to say, we have yet to fully grasp the fundamental nature of the network and the beach which we have come to rely upon. One might liken our relationship with it to that of primitive man's with fire. Is it useful? Quite. Is it dangerous? Undeniably so. Nevertheless, we have decided that the reward outweighs the risk. Furthermore, as the BTs are linked to the beach, it stands to reason that further study and experimentation could be of considerable benefit. The same could be said regarding you, of course. Rest assured, I will keep you apprised of what I learn. You have my word.
I realized the beach was connected to the world of the dead, which meant that somewhere out beyond it were the memories of time itself, including those of every organism that had ever lived. 4.6 billion years of biological history, a history that might even stretch back to the creation of the universe. The chiral network and everything that followed was born from my pursuit of that knowledge. By passing data through the beach, we were unbound by the restrictions of time. Simulations that would have taken years or more were simple and effortless. Everything that the Earth had lost and forgotten could be reconstructed and reclaimed. But shortly after we began our research, America saw its first void out. I thought I was running out of time, that my nightmares were becoming a reality. So I raced to complete the chiral network as quickly as possible. The past held all the answers. If only I could find a way to piece them together. A network that bridged our world and the beach. That might do it, I believed.
The biggest difference is that the beach is being used as the explanation for everything rather than the quantum entanglement state, one of the qubit equations. To briefly summarize, quantum entanglement is a physical phenomenon that occurs when a pair or group of particles are generated, interact, or share spatial proximity in such a way that the quantum state of each particle of the pair or group cannot be described independently of the state of the others, including when the particles are separated by a large distance. This then ties into the Schrödinger equation, which describes the wave function or state function of a quantum mechanical system. I've discussed this a few times on the channel, but to briefly summarize and expand a bit on former discussions. Schrödinger's idea was that when something is not under observation, all of its possible states are simultaneously reality. It is not until it is observed that a state is defined and the wave function collapses, defining the universe the observer is in. So while the BB is observed in that it's in a pod, we can see it and it appears alive. The way it all works is explained by Deadman and Sam.
Deadman, you there? Little help?
Okay, Sam. Remove the pod and connect it to that incubator.
It's in.
Good. A temporary excessive stress. Easily addressed if we return it to its mother's womb.
Mother?
Located in the capital Knot City ICU. Brain dead, of course.
You mean still mother?
Correct. A still mother's womb facilitates a connection between the world of the dead and the BB. And you, in turn, connect yourself to a BB, granting you the ability to sense BTs. These pods were designed to simulate the conditions inside a still mother's womb. BBs need to believe they're in one at all times to function properly. However, we can only maintain this deception for so long, which is why we must periodically update the environmental data by synchronizing it with a still mother via the chiral network. There. The update is in progress. Right now, the pod is synchronizing with the Steel Mother in Capital Knot City and reconfiguring its settings based on the latest data. Returning your BB to the womb in this manner will temporarily reduce its stress levels. That being where it technically belongs, of course.
Kid looks happy.
I'll try adjusting the oxytocin dosage. Autotoxemia should set in much slower from now on. You should remember that BBs are just equipment. Try not to get attached. Each one has been physically removed from its Steel Mother's womb. A process that renders them unpredictable and prone to failure. No BB on record has remained in service for over a year. It may need to be retired before this expedition is over.
And then? You saying there's no way to keep my BB alive?
You must understand, there is still a great deal we don't know about BBs. As we expand the chiral network and recover more past data, perhaps we'll find our answers.
So really, in Death Stranding, it's a combination of the BB and its connection with its mother, or Still Mother. The Still Mother maintains the open wave function and allows for Sam to connect to the BB and see the BTs. This likely also explains why you have to stand still in order to see the BTs, as you can go in any direction when you're standing still, whereas when you're in motion, you really only have 4 options. Keep moving in the current direction, turn left, turn right, or stop. So when you're in movement, the wave function has collapsed for Sam and a universe is decided upon. When still, the wave function is open for Sam. And of course, all of this ties into the Copplethorne engine, which will come back in at the end of the video. Chapter 6.
Would you mind doing the honors?
I've really gotten myself in deep here. Be grateful I love you lot of Kojima conspiracy nuts, otherwise I wouldn't be trying to simplify quantum mechanics. Going back to the Cupid itself, here are all of the Cupid equations. The reaction diffusion equation, the Dirac equation, the Higgs field, the Einstein field equation, quantum entanglement state, and the Schwarzschild radius. Also, upon putting the Cupid on the dock, the Schrödinger equation and an equation related to Lagrangian density are displayed as chiralgrams. I'm going to do my best to give an explanation of why these are relevant. Please let me know in the comments if I'm off. Starting with the reaction diffusion equation, they are mathematical models which correspond to several physical phenomena. The most common is the change in space and time of a concentration of one or more chemical substances, local reactions in which the substances are transformed into each other, and diffusion, which causes the substances to spread out over a surface in space. It says that it's been argued that reaction diffusion processes are an essential basis for processes connected to morphogenesis in biology. Morphogenesis is the biological process that causes a cell, tissue, or organism to develop its shape. It is one of 3 fundamental aspects of developmental biology, along with the control of tissue growth and patterning of cellular differentiation. So basically, this is responsible for all organic matter growing into whatever it becomes. If I had to guess, this is tied to timefall and how it affects all organic matter. Perhaps it's what gave Amelie control over that, or at least it was causing her to affect it. Otherwise, why is it when her and her beach were gone that rain was no longer timefall? The Dirac equation is a part of quantum mechanics relating to Einstein's special relativity. It was the first theory to account fully for special relativity in context of quantum mechanics. It predicted the existence of antimatter. That's not to be confused with dark matter. Dark matter is a form of matter thought to account for about 85% of the matter in the universe. In modern physics, antimatter is defined as matter which is composed of the antiparticles, or partners, of the corresponding particles of ordinary matter. In theory, a particle and its antiparticle, for example a proton and an antiproton, have the same mass but opposite electrical charge, and other differences in quantum numbers. If I had to guess, this directly correlates with the beach since everything there is chiral to the world of the living. So if all the particles we see are the ordinary particles, then all of the particles on the beach are the antiparticles. I'm sure this goes further, but that's as far as I'm willing to speculate on the Dirac equation. The Higgs field is discussed a bit in Death Stranding, obviously, as there is a character named Higgs. This is in reference to the God particle, which as it turns out is a term that scientists hate. Anyway, in the standard model of particle physics, the Higgs mechanism was made to explain the generation mechanism of the property mass for gauge bosons. In theoretical physics, a mass generation mechanism is a theory that describes the origin of mass from the most fundamental laws of physics. The simplest description is that the mechanism adds a quantum field that permeates all space to the standard model. So to me, this directly contributes to the chiral printers. The equation on the Cupid allows them at least some control over the Higgs field, which allows them to form whatever mass they desire. However, of course, it can't be formed out of thin air, so materials are still required. They can just take those materials and turn them into whatever they can create schematics for. The Einstein field equations are a part of the general theory of relativity, not to be confused with special relativity. Special relativity applies to all physical phenomena in the absence of gravity. General relativity explains the law of gravitation and its relation to other forces of nature. It applies to the cosmological and astrophysical realm, including astronomy. Anyway, the Einstein field equations relate to the geometry of space-time to the distribution of matter within it. The Einstein field equations are particularly dense, so I'm not going to do a great job boiling it down, but basically I think the way it's used for the Cupid is to allow for manipulation of space-time. This would explain why when your friends are looking for you, they're seen at the very beginning of the game when Sam ends up on his beach, as well as eventually at the end of the game when the five figures are explained as being them trying to rescue you from the beach. More than that, I think the reason for it is to stabilize the connection to the beach because the beach doesn't exist in one time, but in all times. This can also explain how the chiral network allows for bridges to retain information that was once lost, even without having access to the devices that information was stored on. Furthermore, this would explain how the beach can transfer information and how, as Hartman put it, it's like sending the information to the past, making it in essence a time machine. Lastly, we have the Schwarzschild radius. The Schwarzschild radius, sometimes historically referred to as the gravitational radius, is a physical parameter that shows up in the Schwarzschild solution to Einstein's field equations, corresponding to the radius defining the event horizon of a Schwarzschild black hole. It is a characteristic radius associated with every quantity of mass. However, with that said, I think where it comes into play is that it is used in gravitational time dilation. As you may know, the way we experience time is relative to our distance to a large body where gravity affects us. So the further we are from Earth or another celestial body, the slower we experience time. That's why in some sci-fi movies and shows, you'll see a fairly young man return home, but all of his family is significantly older.
The first operation, I was only 20. I opened my eyes and found myself on the beach. I was back in the hospital bed. I was split across 2 worlds. Bridget, my Ha in that one. Amelie, my Ka in this. Somehow, the 2 of us managed to coexist. Soon, our ages began to diverge. Only Bridget's body got older, while the beach kept Amelie's the same. So I came up with a story. I told people that Amelie was my daughter. A daughter with a debilitating condition and an absent father. Look. Amelie. Is French for soul. A soul that's a lie. There was no Amelie. Only me and the beach. I thought it was a curse in the beginning. But later, I started thinking, maybe I can use this. The answers to those questions would tell me how to stop the 6th. I founded Bridges, more determined than ever to build a chiral network that would cover all of America. But the longer I fought my war against the inevitable, the weaker I became. My Ha had cancer. The beach's punishment, maybe, for not playing along like a good little EE. And then, just like that, my Ha was gone. I couldn't finish what I'd started. So, I asked you to do it for me. And you did. You helped us complete the network. Helped us to reclaim everything the universe experienced from its inception to this moment.
To give its proper definition, time dilation is a difference in the elapsed time as measured by 2 clocks due to a relative velocity between them or due to a difference in gravitational potential between their locations. After compensating for varying signal delays due to the changing distance between an observer and a moving clock, the observer will measure the moving clock as ticking slower than a clock at its rest in the observer's own reference frame. So, if I had to guess, this also has to do with stabilizing the connection to the beach. Time dilation on the beach seems to be ridiculous, which could be due to what could be said to be a practically infinite gravitational potential, which would make sense due to the chiralium since it comes from the beach. Keep in mind though, the last 2 chapters of this video were my best attempts at boiling incredibly complex concepts that are discussed and dictated by people with years of schooling and even more years of research under their belt. If you want to learn more about these concepts, there are many outlets and avenues for doing so, as well as documentaries that do a much better job at boiling it down. I just wanted to try and make these concepts digestible in a relatively short chunk, so that you can see how they are implemented in Death Stranding to the best of my understanding. Chapter 7. Now then, enough about quantum physics and how it all relates to Death Stranding. Let's get back to talking about the connection with Metal Gear. Or rather, how if there's a connection to Metal Gear, then Metal Gear's connection to Silent Hill has to be addressed too. This, of course, is because not only does Death Stranding have many similarities both in-game, in concept, and in concept art pieces like this one where Mads looks like he's in front of a halo of the sun, but Norman was slated to be the main character of Silent Hills as was revealed at the end of PT. That, and while it may have just been a case of the developers of Silent Hill 3 including this picture, either because they were fans of the movie this picture is from, or if they just randomly used it, it doesn't matter either way, because there's no way in hell it was a coincidence that Kojima wouldn't have known about that. He knew damn well about it, and used that to his advantage to plant the seed of a crossover within the minds of us Ludens.
This almost seems impossible to me, especially given that there was a nod to MGS in Silent Hill 3 as well. This is noted in the Silent Hill wiki.
Heather sees a pair of legs behind the wall wearing camouflage when she finds the silencer. According to the Brady Games strategy guide, the corpse behind the wall was supposed to be a cameo of Solid Snake, hence the military fatigues the corpse wears, and the silencer belongs to him. In the same vein, the concrete wall containing the silencer appears to be a nod to the armory wall puzzle in Metal Gear Solid, in which Snake has to find and destroy a differently colored wall in Shadow Moses in order to continue on. The wiki says it seems to be a nod, but there's no way in hell that's another coincidence. Going back to Death Stranding and its connection to Silent Hill, there's one that I can't believe I've neglected to mention all the way up until now. Ludens appears to be the modern-day Pyramid Head. However, instead of representing Sam's fears, he's almost akin to the twist in Fight Club, where the audience is informed that Tyler Durden was a figment of the narrator's imagination the entire time, and was a representation of what the narrator wanted to be. Tenacious, ready to fight at the drop of a hat, a natural leader, and ripped. Instead, Ludens represents true freedom. The biggest thing that made us Sons of Bridges believe that Ludens is a chiral reflection of Pyramid Head is that he has a very similar spear to Pyramid Head as shown in this Silent Hill comic. However, with that said, as I was writing this, I had a realization that there's another layer that can be derived from this. What if instead of him being a representation of what Sam wants to be, what if that truly is who Sam is? I've got a few pieces of evidence to back this up, but basically it boils down to this. When I was running through Death Stranding for my second go on PC, I noticed that there was this clicking sound when you're in the seam. Then I realized only today while writing this that not everyone hears the sound, and for most people it's just the sound of water. But check this out. This is unaltered audio and video from August 1st of this year. It's weird, right? To me, that dispels the theory that we, the player, are not Sam, but his inner BB controlling him. What it says to me is that we are Ludens the entire time, and that Ludens' appearance is Sam's subconscious trying to remind him of the truth, that he is in a simulation that simultaneously acts as a bridge between dimensions. Aside from that, Ludens fan in particular is constantly talking about Ludens, the different things that make him significant, the game he was part of, and when you first meet him, he confesses that he feels a certain connection with Sam despite only having just met him. To me, that's the biggest hint of all, that Sam is in fact Ludens. I'm definitely not the only person to say this or theorize that Sam is Ludens. There's several other pictures and videos online that have discussed this with visuals as the main backing, as Ludens has Norman's eyes. But I think it's safe to confirm this now. Sam is Ludens, or more importantly, we are all Homo Ludens. We are those who play. Chapter 8.
You can't trust the tap water.
I'm going to talk about a few more connections between Silent Hill and Metal Gear that can be easily missed by most people. Some people will write this off simply as Easter eggs, but I don't think that's very likely. Some of this stuff I've discussed at least briefly, but I'm going to go over them as listed on the MGS wiki. On Metal Gear's side, the main antagonist of the series, God, made a cameo as a painting and Granny Gorky in Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. The character Alessa Gillespie from the first game also makes a cameo as a painting in the same game, right next to the God painting. In addition, one of the rewardable headgear in Metal Gear Online is based on Robbie the Rabbit. In one of the playable demos for Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain, a decoy had Lisa from PT appearing from it, and another demo had the Silent Hills logo. In the game itself, the radio drama that was heard in the demo could be heard in the tent right before the tunnel to Ingumba Industrial Zone. A similar radio transmission from PT was also heard in one of the outposts via a boombox in the 6th mission in the game, not counting the prologue. In Metal Gear Survive, there were 2 references to Silent Hill in the game, both relating to the event The Researcher's Story, Special Edition. The first was in the flavor text, where an addendum to the text in purple had Chloe Dubois' message stating she had recurring nightmares about creatures that were explicitly not related to the Wanderers, indirectly alluding to the various creatures in the Silent Hill games. The other is one of the prizes in the event, a head accessory that was derived from the character Pyramid Head from Silent Hill 2 and various other subsequent games in the series. In Hideo Kojima's developer diary included in Metal Gear Solid 2, The Making, Megumi Kori, the actress who portrayed Mei Ling in the photoshoot mode for Metal Gear Solid Integral, later portrayed a child in the first Silent Hill game, presumably referring to Cheryl, although neither the credits for Silent Hill nor her acting company, Imagica, confirmed this claim. On Silent Hill's side, as noted earlier, the cadaver hidden in a wall where the player can acquire the silencer in Silent Hill 3 is implied by Brady Games Guide to be Solid Snake. In addition, the MSG boxes at Konami Burger in Silent Hill Origins was speculated to be a partial reference to Metal Gear Solid. In the PT demo trailer, there was a boy with a deformed face that strongly resembles Chico, or rather the character as he appeared in Ground Zeroes. Lastly, although not a direct reference in itself, the main antagonist of Silent Hill 3, Claudia Wolf, was modeled after and in the initial releases voiced by Donna Burke, the main singer of various vocal themes since Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, as well as the voice actress for the iDroid. This last bit isn't noted, but she also played Angela Orozco in Silent Hill 2, which could imply that she is going to be a Ludens, along with Kaz/Deadman, Pig/Ocelot, and our other friends. Chapter 9.
You will birth a god and build an eternal paradise.
I'd like to discuss the connection of the god lore in Silent Hill with the EE lore of Death Stranding here. Or rather, give another piece of evidence given by a contributor to the series as well as patron by the name of Zeroless. If you'll remember, at some point in Death Stranding, young Sam is talking to Bridget about the Dreamcatcher, and how the Dreamcatcher originated in the Hopi culture. It symbolized the web of the Spider-Woman, or Spider-Grandmother. I'll have to explain the Hopi creation myth to explain why this is connected. The story begins with Tawa the Sun God and Spider-Woman, who is identified with the Earth Goddess. They separate themselves to create other lesser gods, then create the Earth and its creatures. Spider-Woman and Tawa realized the creatures they made were not alive, so they gave them souls. After this, they created woman and man from their own likeness and sang them to life. From there, Spider-Woman separated creatures into tribes and led them through the 4 great caverns. After they came to their final home, Spider-Woman tells the people the roles of a woman and a man, as well as the religious practices they were to follow. Spider-Grandmother, or Asibikashi, among many other names, can take the shape of an old or timeless woman or the shape of a common spider in many Hopi stories. First, let's look at PT as a reminder. If you look in the corner to the right above the drawer with the radio on it, you'll see a spider that's ever present. Some theorize this to be Kojima, and in a sense you could say that. But its influence definitely seems to be from this myth of the Spider-Woman, which would mean that the intent is likely that it's actually the boss AI if the boss is God of this AI world. To further emphasize the significance of this, as you're likely aware, there's a spider on Snake's shoulder in the MGSV pre-release gameplay demonstrations. They showed you about Mother Base as they were illustrating your ability to customize the logo and how it would affect your patch as well as Mother Base. They chose to put a spider on the symbol with the letters PT next to it. No coincidence there given Chico's appearance in the PT trailer. Now, to round it all off, the whole reason why it's all connected, you should be aware of where I'm going with this if you've finished the story of Death Stranding and seen all the cutscenes. Amelie, during the last fight, is stuck in a web made of chiralium. I think the implication was that she was trapped in a web, but I think the reality is that it was her web. My biggest proof of this is that Higgs was never keeping her captive. He reveals this himself when Fragile has her chat with him. He was working for Amelie. It was all a drama for her to manipulate Sam into connecting up the chiral network, which ultimately enabled her to get to the point of starting the last extinction. And supposedly, she's sacrificing herself and her beach to save humanity, even if for a while longer. But I think it was another lie. I mean, if it wasn't, how is she communicating to Sam on his beach? An afterimage? Was she his conscience? If she's God as we've theorized, then she's also the architect, as the architect is also hellbent on another extinction in the Matrix. And really, Death Stranding is basically an alternate Zion with a false pretext for the audience. I'll explain that another time, ruse or no ruse. Chapter 10. I Won't Wake Without a Song to Sing. I'd like to go ahead and discuss some things that have been said and done by certain musicians that we have known to be connected with Death Stranding. Things they've done or released over the last year and some change, to be specific. Let's start with Low Roar, since that's who this chapter is quoting. On the day of Death Stranding's release, Low Roar released an album just called Ross. It's a great album, but a definite departure from the rest of their music. With that said, there's many themes in that album that seem to be written with the intent to tie into Death Stranding, which would make sense given that they released on the same day, and Ryan specifically said on an autograph to Kojima, "Let me write more music for you." To clarify that thought, I think that Kojima lied about how he discovered their music, having just heard something off their self-titled album rather than I'll Keep Coming from their Zero album. Then he convinced them to add certain themes to the lyrics and composition of their music that would tie in with Death Stranding, and all of these connections. Simulation, which is hinted by the music video of Bones, as well as Give Me an Answer. Not to mention songs like Tonight, 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 working really well with the idea of a system crash with its ending. 222 solidifying that on the Ross album. The Machine being double entendre for both AI and a system of control over people. Slow Down being a highly fitting song for Sam at the end of the game, and much more I'll discuss in a side-op of the series, should there be a need for it after the Game Awards. Low Roar also released an EP called Inure in May of this year. I'm not going to go into detail on these right now, but there's 4 songs, and they all seem to speak to the themes of Death Stranding, at least in their title. Time and Space, given the quantum nature of Death Stranding. Do You Miss Me, sounding like a question from either Amelie to Sam, or Lucy, Sam's dead wife, to him. And The Shepherd, which just makes me think of a combination of Sam and Bridges shepherding the people back into order rather than them continuing to be scattered to the 4 winds, as Die Hardman put it. Chapter 11. Don't Call It a Warning, This is a War. Moving on from Low Roar, there's also been some interesting stuff coming from Bring Me the Horizon. They pretty much ghost dropped an album called Music to Listen To. I've barely heard anyone talk about it, and I think that's partially to do with its absolute lack of fanfare from the group themselves, as well as its very experimental and different tone and writing style. A lot of it seems very freeform in its composition and doesn't really line up with anything they've done in the past. I can't really describe it, but it's worth listening to. More recently though, with a good amount of fanfare in the form of their series of behind-the-scenes videos covering the making of their latest music, they created an EP called Post-Human Survival Horror. The first thing I think most people are going to latch onto is the choice of wording including survival horror in the title. This is actually backed up by the opening song on this EP, Dear Diary, being a love letter to Resident Evil in particular. I'll spell that out real quick for you guys, then we'll move on. In Resident Evil 1, there's a journal entry called The Keeper's Diary. In it, it details the following. May 9th, 1998. At night we played poker with Scott the guard, Alias and Steve the researcher. Steve was very lucky, but I think he was cheating. What a scumbag. May 10th, 1998. Today, a high-ranking researcher asked me to take care of a new monster. It looks like a gorilla without any skin. They told me to feed them live food. When I threw in a pig, they were playing with it. tearing off the pig's legs and pulling out the guts before they actually ate it. May 11th, 1998. Around 5 o'clock this morning, Scott came in and woke me up suddenly. He was wearing a protective suit that looked like a spacesuit. He told me to put one on as well. I heard there was an accident in the basement lab. It's no wonder those researchers never rest, even at night. Now to help make this easier to see, I'm going to alternate with these and the lyrics. Dear Diary, I don't know what's going on, but something's up. The dog won't stop barking, and I think my TV is bust. Every channel is the same, it's sending me insane. And earlier, somebody bit me. What a fucking day. May 12th, 1998. I've been wearing this annoying spacesuit since yesterday. My skin grows musty and feels very itchy. By way of revenge, I didn't feed those dogs today. Now I feel better. May 13th, 1998. I went to the medical room because my back is all swollen and feels itchy. They put a big bandage on my back and the doctor told me I did not need to wear the spacesuit anymore. I guess I can sleep well tonight. May 14th, 1998. When I woke up this morning, I found another blister on my foot. It was annoying and I ended up dragging my foot as I went to the dog's pen. They have been quiet since morning, which is very unusual. I found that some of them had escaped. I'll be in real trouble if the higher-ups find out. Dear Diary, I feel itchy like there's bugs under my skin. The dog's gone rabid, shut the fuck up doing my head in. I keep fading in and out, I don't know where I've been. I feel so hungry, what the hell is happening? May 15th, 1998. Even though I didn't feel well, I decided to go see Nancy. It's my first day off in a long time, but I was stopped by the guard on the way out. They say the company has ordered that no one leave the grounds. I can't even make a phone call. What kind of joke is this? May 16th, 1998. I heard a researcher who tried to escape from the mansion was shot last night. My entire body feels burning and itchy at night. When I was scratching the swelling on my arms, a lump of rotten flesh dropped off. What the hell is happening to me? May 19th, 1998.
Fever gone, but itchy. Hungry and eat doggy food. Itchy, itchy, Scott came. Ugly face, so kill him. Tasty. 4. Itchy. Tasty.
Dear Diary, dog stopped barking probably because I ate his face. Tasty, itchy TV say there's no more human race. Kinda sad my whole existence been a waste. Ah, never mind, it's not the end of the world. Oh, wait. Then there's the chorus, which refers to being brain dead, a way to describe being a zombie. The song is a blatant discussion of this last year as a whole, that the pandemic has real life feeling like a survival horror. Simultaneously, though, what people tend to gloss over is post-human. What is the definition of post-human? Well, post means after in this context, so after humanity, which implies a higher form. Post-humanism is a concept originating in the fields of science fiction, futurology, contemporary art, and philosophy that literally means a person or entity that exists in a state beyond being human. This should be fairly obvious to anyone who's been a regular viewer, or if you're already familiar with what this means. But in essence, it's alluding to the idea of uploading your consciousness to live as an AI forever. This is visible especially in the music video for Parasite Eve, another song alluding to a video game in the horror genre, this time much more blatantly with its title. Aside from it being a song that's titled after a game in the horror genre, if you pay attention to some of the movements in the video, the different band members end up moving erratically, looking almost like Silent Hill characters, which obviously was inspired by Jacob's Ladder. Interestingly, Parasite Eve was a song in process before the pandemic hit, as noted in their behind-the-scenes video. Then it became a lot more real once quarantine became a necessity. This is also the EP that Ludens officially belongs to, so there's that. Teardrops is very reminiscent of Death Stranding and Dooms. Obey is very 1984 in lyrical tone, but very Power Rangers inspired for the music video. And then, One Day the Only Butterflies Left Will Be in Your Chest as You March Towards Your Death. Holy shit, that's a long title. Well, I don't think I need to remind you of the explanation of the significance of butterfly symbolism with the phantom pain and hallucinations. That, and of course, the lyrics for the song are, to me, speaking against suicide, almost a plea in the form of a love song. At the end of Death Stranding, Sam tries to kill himself. Even if you don't fire any of the bullets in Amelie and all of the chambers are full, it still won't go off when Sam tries to shoot himself. And yes, that's possible, as you can see from the clip I'm playing that I recorded.
A gun won't help you here, but it still has a role to play.
Chapter 12. One more ending before the end. One last game over. I want to share the reason why I got so amped to make this video in the first place. I'm providing this clip because I know many people are still confused where all of this stuff about Silent Hills and a Metal Gear Solid remake are coming from. Well, there have been rumors of these things for a while. An industry insider by the name of Moore's Law is Dead has recently discussed in a podcast that it is indeed happening. I'll be frank, I don't know if this is legit or not. I've heard some people saying this guy isn't as good with console information, but it gave me hope regardless. And that hope inspired me to pump this video out as quickly as I could.
It's very good. Well, speaking of Demon Souls and exclusives made by Bluepoint, let us move on to story number 7. So this is just, I'm going to talk about the PlayStation 5 exclusives I know are coming out, guys. It'll be in the title of this podcast. I've been hinting at it, not subtly at all, in Die Shrinks for months. And in videos and other open podcasts. Me and NX Gamer basically just openly confirmed one of them with our jokes. I'm just going to say it. So throughout the past 6 months, I've been getting hints at what some of these exclusives are. One of them was God of War, which I want to be very clear. I've heard some people suggest another tech tuber told me about God of War. No, I checked the DMs. I told him. So I have proof of that. I'm not going to name names because I don't know if anyone actually said anything and I don't know where this thing comes from. No. I told another tech tuber about God of War. And I have the DMs to prove it. I will say that there's been other tech tubers who have told me some things too, and that's because we exchange information. But God of War was when I told the other one. And some of these I've been forced to secrecy, but now I have other sources telling me these as well. So now I have multiple sources telling me some of these things, so I'm just going to say it. Silent Hills, that sounds almost entirely confirmed. I say almost entirely again because it's still like I haven't talked to someone working on the game and stuff like that, but it sounds basically confirmed that indeed they were able to work out some deal to have Kojima work on this game. And I think there's a chance they may reveal it, as I not so subtly hinted on Twitter to Jeff Keighley. I think they may reveal it at the VGAs, guys. And go on.
No, I mean, I'm excited to see that if it happens. At
the very least, I know this is something they're working on, whether it's revealed now or not.
Yeah, I know. I'm always incredibly excited for whatever Kojima is doing.
So this is where I just say, yeah, I've known about a Metal Gear Solid remake for a while, guys. I have been very openly hinting at it, but I couldn't confirm it until I have other sources tell me, and now I don't know it just from the original source. So MGS Remake, I'm confirming it, and I'm told it's made by Bluepoint. And in fact, I'm told that they've been working on this for 3 years.
I mean,
that they were working on this simultaneously with Demon Souls. We'll see if that turns out to be true. But yeah, this is that big. And that's why when it's like this launch exclusive Cerny's been working on, I said, I always was told that Cerny was working on some exclusive. I just didn't know what it was. Another source said MGS. I was told I couldn't say MGS. Now I can because I have another source saying it. So the fact of the matter is, the reason it could have been a launch game is because they've been working on it for 3 years and there's big gameplay demos people have seen already. But they don't see a need to release it. Right? And they might as well polish it. I mean, how many times has Cyberpunk been delayed? It was delayed again and no one said it could be. Now it's delayed to December. They don't see a reason to reveal nor confirm release dates for these games. More polish is always better. They feel like they have enough exclusives when frankly they have no competition in the exclusives department.
Yeah, and Bluepoint's the studio to make it. Like, I think Bluepoint's clearly the best at remaking games out there right now. So I'm really excited to see what they do with MGS.
Well, and here's the thing too. When you go back and look at Bluepoint's history, you realize there's a lot of Metal Gear Solid remake work in there. And you realize that literally with Shadow of the Colossus, they made it on PS3 first. And then they also they ported it to PS3. And then they also remade it with a couple new add-ons for PS4. So then think about it. They ported these games to PS3, Metal Gear Solid, and now they're remaking it for PS5. It's the same pattern of Shadow of the Colossus.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So if you listen to recent interviews, they also talked about how they only wanted to take on projects because they're a smaller team. I believe they're only about 100 to 200 people, and that they're kind of being used. They didn't want to. I think Digital Foundry, I did an interview with them. It was very interesting how they talked about how like they did like Metal Gear Solid remasters on PS2 and PS3 first, and then they wanted to work on PS3 first. I mean, and then they wanted to, and Vita, I guess. And then they wanted to work on remastering Uncharted because that's easy. It already looked good. They're basically just uprising it and making the frame rate stable. And then they worked on Demon's Souls because they didn't need to change any of the gameplay, but it would be a huge undertaking, just literally remaking the game in a new engine. And then they see Metal Gear Solid as the one they can't screw up the most. So they wanted to make that one come out later once they had more experience. So they remaster PS2 games. Then they worked on remastering PS3, and then Demon's Souls was a full remake. They're probably going to be acquired by Sony soon. And Metal Gear Solid is their big showcase of what they can really do. Because look, remaking Demon's Souls, it's still the same gameplay, but it's a new engine. Remaking Metal Gear Solid 1 is not just a new engine. They're making big design choices now.
With MGS, they need to really start making like creative decisions because how are you going to remake MGS on in a modern console but keep the soul of what MGS is? Because
let's be clear, I believe it's like MGS5 controls. I don't think they're going to. I mean, if anyone's played the original Metal Gear Solid, it's frankly almost unplayable. Like, wouldn't be surprised if a Gen Z picked it up and went, "This is cancer." And I'm like, yeah, the controls are pretty bad in some games back then.
I mean, even MGS3, for a lot of people, would be too inaccessible to try to play at this point. Like, I've played it and I love that game, but I don't think a lot of people that would give it a chance at this point.
Yeah, it's Metal Gear Solid 1 is insanely unplayable. I think even Kojima said he went back and played it and said, this sucks.
So I'm really excited to see whatever they do.
All I got to say is, remember, they've been working on this MGS game for a while, based on my information. If it turns out wrong, well, whatever. And same with Silent Hills, is they've been working on that for a while. God of War, guys, they've had a team working on this since, I think, when did God of War come out? Was it early 2018?
I want to say 2018. So there's a good chance that'll come to fruition. So yeah, 3.5 years isn't insane. And look, I want to be clear though, it would not surprise me if some of these games were delayed to 2022 because look, talking to a source, it's like, so wait, are these actually coming out next year though? And he's like, yeah, no, seriously, next year they're just going to be like Ratchet and Clank, then Gran Turismo, then Returnal, then Deathloop, then Horizon, then God of War, then MGS, and Silent Hills is there somewhere maybe as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if they delayed some of these, but from what I'm told, their intention is to carpet bomb the Halo release. Like literally just every few weeks have a new AAA exclusive coming out next year. That like this is their show of force. That they're like, no. Not only are we doubling down on exclusives, we've been holding back games that could have we're really, Yeah, and we'll see.
Other people are pointing back to when Bluepoint on Halloween last year posted this GIF with the following message. So calm this spooky night. A symphony of rumors. Not one, but two return from shadow. A resistance to dart home as black monsters escape twisted hills, to wander lands and siphon hills. Filter your candy collection, soft from solid, and be eco-friendly. Have a metal Halloween. To list all the potential hints, there's Symphony of the Night, Metal Gear Solid, Resistance Fall of Man, Ape Escape, Twisted Metal, Silent Hills, and Siphon Filter. There's 3 words that would fit Metal Gear Solid, given Shadow for Shadow Moses, Metal, and Solid in Metal Gear Solid. And with that alleged leak noted just moments ago, it seems most likely that it's going to be a Metal Gear Solid remake. Furthermore, there's also this tweet that I could remind you of. The moon? Everything looks red from here. And it will likely be a remake in the sense that Final Fantasy VII got a remake, in that major elements will be changed to facilitate the ideas we've been talking about regarding Copplethorne, simulations, and a quantum connection to infinite parallel dimensions. Another thing I'd like to bring up is Astro's Playroom. I know a lot of people are going to say this is cherry picking, but I think it's valid. There's references to Silent Hill, Metal Gear Solid, and Death Stranding. I will concede that these franchises are all generally speaking associated with Sony, but the reason isn't really a fair one as they were all multi-platform. MGS1 released on PC and PS1, MGS2 released on PC, PS2, and Xbox, MGS3, MGS4, and Peace Walker were all the only exclusives for their initial release, then eventually all but MGS4 got multi-platform ports. MGS-V came out on everything that could run it at the time. Silent Hill is much the same. Silent Hill 1, PC and PS1. Silent Hill 2, PC, PS2, and Xbox. Silent Hill 3 and 4, PC and PS2. Homecoming, PC, PS3, and 360. Downpour, PS3 and 360. Shattered Memories and Origins, PS2, PSP, and Wii. The only Silent Hill game that was PlayStation exclusive was the Diablo clone to the PS Vita. So why were all these associated with the PlayStation brand? Simple. The PS1 and PS2 are the most popular consoles of those generations, and that's where the most copies sold as a result. Well, that and it was always the base version, which is why the PS2 version of Silent Hill 2 and 3 are the best versions with the official vanilla releases. Chapter 13.
Not yet, Snake! It's not over yet!
Aside from this, I mentioned this DLC in my last Ruse news, but there's also the Dead by Daylight Silent Hill edition, which is suspicious as all hell. Why the fuck does this exist but no other special editions for any of the other huge horror franchises do? Just to name a few, we've got Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Ash from The Evil Dead, the Demogorgon from Stranger Things, Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street, even the Pig from Saw. With how much those franchises have reached people outside of games, and for how much longer they've been around than Silent Hill, why is it only Silent Hill that got its own special edition? Any of those other options mentioned, as well as the others I'm not familiar with, could have gotten one and it would have made sense. This still doesn't make sense to me. So yeah, with everything we've talked about, I find the timing of these leaks to simply be just rumors a bit laughable. There's a small chance it's a troll pretending to have information that was then shared with Moore's Law is dead just to fuck with us Rusers one more time, or Moore's Law making things up to sound more interesting than he is. But I didn't get that impression that he was that kind of guy, and given the possibilities we've discussed over the past 4 years, I'm hopeful that we'll finally be vindicated. But before we wrap up, I'd like to discuss the picture I made earlier this year comparing the chandelier chirogram on the ceiling in the incinerator, the structure of the SOP system in MGS4, and real-life quantum computers. If you search external gazer MGS2 Snaketails and read the text, you'll get a pretty detailed explanation of what the Copplethorne engine is. I'll also make a separate video discussing this, but this video is long enough at this point. I think it's pretty obvious that the chandelier represented much more than a computer system. It represented the interconnected nature of Death Stranding and the idea that our galaxy consists of some 300 billion stars. Around half are orbited by planets, and it is said that on average, conditions on 2 of a star's planets are suitable for life. No great leap of imagination is needed to believe the universe must be home to a myriad of life forms. But what sorts of intelligence would develop on these worlds? This is truly beyond our imagination. What's more, we cannot say that our universe is the only universe at the quantum level, until a wave function collapses upon observation. Schrödinger's cat is alive and dead as a superposition of states. The moment observation occurs, these two possibilities branch into separate worlds, with the universe continuing to split infinitely. If the universe splits without end, it's possible it could eventually recreate scenes from the past. And if those moments played out differently, it wouldn't negate what just happened in our reality. A paradox would simply mean another future. What you've just listened to is one possible story in one possible universe, born of paradox after paradox after paradox. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this very rushed video that was compiled with information gathered over the last year. There was some redundant info here and there, but I did my best to keep it minimal and for the sake of keeping context clearly understandable, whether or not you actually were, understanding of all of the information given in the past. I've got many other videos in this series if you're new to the channel, or if you've only watched my Kojima content, maybe give my movie essay series a shot. Both will continue, ruse or no ruse, because I love Kojima's art too much and I love movies too much not to talk about them. So please, give movies that don't suck a try if you haven't, and keep your eyes out for more videos talking about Hideo Kojima coming from me. There's links below to support the channel or follow social media. Also, don't forget to do the things to get the videos, because YouTube is being a bunch of dicks and my videos aren't showing up in sub boxes. Anyway guys, until next time, this is Retro Hellspawn, signing out. Have a good one.